Hey, tonight we're traveling way back to the ancient city of Ur, nestled along the banks of the Euphrates River. It's one of the oldest cities in human history, deep in the cradle of civilization Mesopotamia. But before you get too cozy, picturing golden sunsets and quiet temples, let me be honest with you. You probably wouldn't survive 10 minutes there. The heat alone would melt your will to live. The mud, the noise, the goats. Oh, the goats. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love seeing how far this sleepy little channel travels. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes to a room made of sun-baked mud bricks. The ceiling is low, the walls still cool from the desert night. Light spills in from a narrow slit high up on the wall a window. But not the kind you'd ever open for a breeze. You're lying on a woven reed mat, your spine still getting used to a world without memory foam. A chicken clucks softly outside, followed by a thud and a curse in Sumerian. Someone's dropped a pot. Again. You sit up. Your joints protest. Your mouth feels dry, your nose full of dust. You reach for the small jug of water beside your mat and take a cautious sip. It's slightly warm and smells faintly of clay, but it's what you've got. Outside, the city is beginning to stir. The street is already alive with barefoot children running, merchants setting up their clay stands, and the sharp bleat of goats being urged in every direction at once. You hear someone hammering a broken cartwheel back together with what sounds like far too much enthusiasm for this hour. You step outside and your feet sink into soft, well-trodden dirt. The air is dry, but not yet scorching. That'll come later. A man rushes past you carrying a basket of dates, nearly knocking over a little girl who's trying to balance a jar of beer on her head. She doesn't flinch, just gives him a look that says she's seen worse. You turn left and begin to walk down a narrow alley between houses. The walls loom close, their brown surfaces cracking under years of sun and use. You pass a shrine, tucked into a corner, where someone has left a small offering, a handful of lentils and a carved figurine of Enki, the water god. A line of ants is already taking full advantage of the lentils. You whisper a respectful greeting to the idol, just in case. This is not a place to offend the gods, not when you're still learning the rules. You follow the smell of breakfast toward a communal cooking area. Women are gathered around low fires, tending to pots of barley porridge thickened with milk and dates. One of them hands you a bowl without asking, and you accept it with a grateful nod. It's surprisingly delicious, nutty. Sweet, a little smoky. You eat quickly, standing near the fire like everyone else, swatting away flies with a palm frond someone's left on the ground. A man approaches you, a neighbor? Maybe? Or just someone who's decided you look new enough to be interesting. He launches into a one-sided conversation about the weather, the canal, and the latest shipment of lapis lazuli. You nod along, catching only every third word, but he seems satisfied. As he walks away, he adds, almost as an afterthought, "Watch your step if you head to the ziggurat. They found a snake in the stairs yesterday." Snakes, of course. The sun climbs higher. Shadows shrink. You begin to sweat. The tunic you were given simple wool, wrapped around your body and cinched with a rope, is already sticking to your back. There is no such thing as deodorant here. You make a mental note to stay downwind of everyone. At the end of the street, you pass two young boys crouched in the dust playing a game with pebbles. One of them is cheating. The other knows but lets it slide. A dog wanders past, too lean, too tired to bark. You look up and catch your first clear view of the ziggurat Ur's massive, stepped temple that towers above the city like a giant's wedding cake. Priests live there. The king consults with the gods there. You, a temporary and probably accidental visitor, will not be invited inside, but you might be allowed to carry something heavy up its steps later, if you're lucky. Historians still argue whether regular citizens were ever truly allowed access to the sacred parts of the temple, or if that was just the privilege of the elites. Either way, it doesn't seem like today's the day you find out. You can smell incense drifting from its upper terraces, mixed with the sour tang of animal offerings. The gods are awake. You continue walking. A pair of young girls pass you, laughing behind painted veils. One wears a string of shell beads around her neck. The other clutches a clay doll. Their sandals kick up little puffs of dust as they disappear around the corner. You smile. Life goes on. Suddenly, there's shouting from a rooftop. A basket of figs comes tumbling down, landing with a splat just inches from your feet. You look up to see an old woman wagging a finger and cackling. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe she just doesn't like your face. You keep walking. Somewhere nearby, a rooster lets out a long, ragged cry that sounds more like protest than celebration. You feel a bead of sweat roll down your temple. A pot crashes in the distance. A baby cries. Two men begin arguing over something that sounds like bread but might be beer. And you realize this place never stops. No one here gets to sleep in. No one here scrolls through their phone before breakfast. No one has time to wonder what it all means. They're too busy hauling water, fixing tools, pleasing gods, and surviving floods. You've barely been awake an hour, and already, it's exhausting. Welcome to ancient Mesopotamia. Your stomach is full now, barely. The barley porridge has settled in like a warm stone, and the morning heat is already starting to wrap around your shoulders like a damp wool blanket. You trudge along the alley, your sandals catching on uneven patches of hardened dirt and dried reed mats. You pass a man crouched in the shade, sharpening a bronze blade against a smooth stone. He doesn't look up, but you can feel his eyes slide toward you, watching, always watching. You're a stranger, and strangers mean stories. Stories often mean trouble. You pause at a small basin near the edge of a courtyard. Water glistens inside, still cool from the night. It's set out for washing, not drinking. You reach in and splash some across your face, rubbing the grit from your eyelids. The basin smells faintly of ash and clay. As you bend over, a group of children races past you, nearly knocking you into the basin entirely. One of them laughs, and another sticks out his tongue before vanishing around the corner. You straighten up and shake the water from your hands. The act of cleaning yourself is a public one here, bathing in full view of your neighbors, scrubbing with sand and oil rather than soap. The idea of privacy as you knew it doesn't exist. Neither does hot water on demand. A nearby woman combs oil through her hair using a carved wooden pick. She hums a slow, low melody that sounds older than the city itself. Behind her, the entrance to a small household temple catches your eye. It's barely more than a decorated niche in the wall, yet it holds offerings, date cakes, a bit of honey, and a clay figurine of Inanna, goddess of love and war. The figurine is dainty, painted faintly with red pigment. You wonder what Inanna thinks of her view. A goat tied nearby is attempting to chew on her base. The street begins to widen as you approach one of the main thoroughfares. The smells intensify: fish drying in the sun, sweat, smoke from breakfast fires, and the sharp tang of animal dung. It's not offensive so much as dense. You breathe through your mouth, or try to. Here, the marketplace unfolds before you. It's a half-mad, fully alive expanse of chaos. Merchants shout from under canopies made of linen and reed. Colorful clay jars line the ground, some filled with oils, others with grains. still others with what might be fermented something or other. The aroma of roasted onions lingers in the air. Somewhere, a flute is playing, faint and off-key. It's hard to tell where music ends and argument begins. A woman draped in wool robes calls out to you, gesturing to a basket of figs. Her expression is hopeful. You reach for one, and she slaps your hand not unkindly, but firmly, and points to a chunk of broken clay tablet with prices scrawled in cuneiform. You squint. It might as well be alien script. A small boy, her assistant perhaps, steps forward and solemnly tells you the cost in barley weight. Barley again. It's more than just food here. It's currency. Wages, offering, and punishment. You nod and mime regretfully that you've got nothing. The woman shrugs and turns away. No barley, no figs. You keep moving, weaving between traders and children and a stray dog that is definitely not friendly. A man hauling a bundle of dyed wool brushes past you, and something sharp pokes out from his load, catching your tunic. You look down and see a fresh tear. Great! Tailors in Ur don't work for free. At the edge of the market, a woman begins to chant something slow, rhythmic, and unmistakably ritualistic. People pause. You follow their gaze and see a small crowd forming around a traveling musician/priest. He wears a painted mask and taps a steady rhythm on a hand drum. His assistant tosses flower petals from a jar, and a child balances a pot on her head while walking in slow circles around him. You're not sure if it's prayer, performance, or both. Likely both. A man beside you murmurs something in Sumerian, then switches to broken Akkadian when he sees your confusion. He sings for Ningal, moon goddess. You nod, grateful for the explanation. Then he adds, if she is pleased, the nights will be cool. If not, more wind. You smile awkwardly and try to look reverent. The man squints at you, unconvinced. Historians still argue whether these public rituals were meant more for devotion or control, keeping people obedient through awe. It's hard to tell. What's clear is that everyone stops to listen. Even the goat has gone quiet. You step back and find yourself beside a stall selling perfumes rosewater, date blossom oil, myrrh. The merchant, a thin man with a patchy beard, offers you a sniff of each by dabbing them on reeds. You inhale gently. The scent is unexpectedly sweet. For a brief moment, the marketplace disappears behind it, just flowers and warmth and a faint memory of quiet. Then someone yells. The spell breaks. Two men are arguing over a jar. One accuses the other of watering down the beer. The crowd murmurs. The merchant sighs and pulls down his canopy. This, it seems, happens a lot. You move on, slipping into a quieter lane. The ground is firmer here, paved with rounded stones. The air smells of wet reeds. You pass an old man etching characters onto a tablet, his fingers calloused and careful. He notices you watching and beckons you closer. You sit beside him. He places a lump of soft clay in front of you and hands you a reed stylus. He gestures for you to try. The clay is cool and slightly sticky. You press the stylus into it, trying to mimic the angled wedges. It's harder than it looks. Your first mark is crooked. The second, too deep. The third, well, let's just say the gods won't be reading your messages today. The scribe chuckles softly and makes a correction with a steady hand. Then he leans over and says, not bad for someone new. Writing, here, is an elite skill. A scribe is part record keeper, part magician. Each mark has meaning. Each line binds an agreement, records a debt, or praises a king, and if you mess it up, well, that's how fights start. You thank him and rise. The street is warming quickly. Shadows retreat. Somewhere nearby, a bell made of bronze rings out, likely from the temple. A call to something, or maybe a warning. You don't know yet, but you're learning. The sound of the bell fades into the background as you continue along the narrowing path. It winds between houses with high mud brick walls, their tops lined with shards of broken pottery meant to deter thieves. It's clever and effective. You duck instinctively when a bird flutters out of a rooftop basket, wings beating against the thick air. The street opens suddenly into a small square where the marketplace spills into a side space filled with traders too late or too unlicensed to get a main spot. Here, things are a little looser. You see bartered goods displayed on reed mats instead of well-formed tables. Old copper tools. Jars of honey already crawling with ants. A worn sandal with only one strap. This is the forgotten corner of commerce. You feel more comfortable here. The chatter is less intense, too. Someone offers you a roasted locust on a stick. You hesitate, then take it. It's crunchy, salty. Not bad, actually. You nod politely, and the vendor gives you a thumbs up. Yes, thumbs existed even then, and approval is timeless. A man with a patch over one eye beckons you toward a stall where clay tablets are displayed like precious relics. They're chipped and old, covered in scribbles, lost records, he whispers. From kings, from lovers, from liars. You raise an eyebrow? He laughs. Some just grocery lists. He shrugs. But still worth something. You glance down. One tablet lists barley, onions, and something you think might be a goat. You step away before you're tempted to trade your sandals for ancient shopping lists. Turning down another alley, the noise shifts again deeper, more rhythmic. You follow it. Ahead, you find a group of laborers hauling massive stones on wooden sleds. They grunt in unison, their bare backs glistening with sweat. Ropes bite into their shoulders. A man barks instructions in a hoarse voice, while another pours water onto the packed earth in front of the sled to reduce friction. It's brilliant in its simplicity and grueling in its execution. You're pulled in to help. There's no asking here, only assuming. One of the men tosses you a rope. It's rough against your palms, and as you pull, your feet slide on the dusty ground. Every muscle in your arms screams. The sun is fully overhead now, and your tunic feels like a wet sack. Still, the block creeps forward inch by inch. When the sled finally rests, the men collapse onto the ground. One of them offers you a piece of flatbread. You take it, nodding thanks, and chew slowly. It's dry, chewy, and warm from the heat of his pocket. You've never been so grateful for something that tastes like slightly sour cardboard. As you sit, catching your breath, someone near you says something about the temple offerings being prepared. You're too exhausted to fully understand. But the word inanna drifts past your ears again, like incense in the air. Another man jokes that if the gods want meat, they should help drag these blocks. A few others chuckle, but not too loudly, not in public. Religious life in Mesopotamia is woven into everything. There is no separation. Every labor, every trade, every meal is an offering of sorts. The gods are always watching, and sometimes they are not kind. You rise and wander past the stone pile, where a group of women are gathered around a shallow pit, molding new bricks from straw and mud. Their hands move fast, practiced. Children nearby shape tiny figures of animals, mimicking their mothers with glee. One holds up a lopsided lion and growls playfully. Further down, the smell changes, richer, deeper. It leads you to a courtyard where a cow has just been slaughtered for temple sacrifice. Blood darkens the earth, and a priest in patterned robes chants softly, while waving a bundle of herbs over the carcass. His movements are slow, deliberate, sacred. People watch in silence. Not out of fear, though there's some of that, but out of tradition. Reverence. You look down at the cobbled earth and notice flowers tucked into the cracks, wilting in the heat. Historians still argue whether these offerings were more symbolic or transactional. Did the gods actually bless the harvest? Or was it just a way to keep order? In this moment, it hardly matters. You feel the pull of belief, the weight of meaning. Even if it's just ritual, it's powerful. A woman beside you whispers that her son is sick, and she hopes this sacrifice will win the goddess's favor. She presses a warm hand to your arm. "Pray with me," she says. You nod. You don't know the words, but you close your eyes and bow your head anyway. The priest finishes. The cow is dragged away, and the crowd begins to disperse. Someone touches your back, a child, no older than 6. He hands you a flower with trembling fingers and runs off giggling. You smile, but the moment doesn't last. A horn blares in the distance, sharp and sudden. People turn their heads. You follow their gaze and spot a figure riding toward the square on a donkey, holding a clay tablet high above his head. A royal messenger. He dismounts and reads aloud. The king is calling for grain. A levy. Every household must contribute by sundown. No excuses, no delays. Grumbling spreads through the square like smoke. A few people shout, others curse under their breath. The woman beside you sighs and mutters, "Always more grain, always more gods." You slip away, ducking down a side path. The walls here are closer, the air hotter, the light dimmer. A narrow channel runs along the center of the street, an open sewer. You step carefully, holding your breath. Around a corner, a man stirs clay in a large vat, his arms caked with white dust. He barely looks up as you pass. You finally emerge near the city's edge, where the buildings grow shorter, humbler. Here, the poor live. Their homes are little more than stacked mud blocks with reed roofs. Children nap in the shade. A woman sings a lullaby. A dog scratches lazily at a doorframe. It's quiet, almost peaceful, until a sharp cry splits the air. Someone's shouting. 2 men wrestle in the dust, locked in an argument over something small, maybe a tool, maybe a debt. A group forms quickly. There is no police force here. Justice is local, often immediate. A 3rd man intervenes, separating them, shouting at both. One of them throws a punch anyway. You take a step back. This could escalate, but just as quickly as it began, it ends. A slap, a curse, a handful of barley tossed in apology. Faces remain tense, but backs begin to turn. Life resumes. You continue walking, your feet sore, your shoulders aching, your mind spinning. This city breathes with rhythms you don't understand yet, but you feel them, and they feel you back. The light shifts subtly as the sun dips lower in the sky, casting long golden beams across the tops of the mud brick houses. Shadows stretch like fingers across the road as you move through the quieter neighborhoods near the canals. The air is still heavy, but there's a slight breeze now, just enough to stir your sweat-damp tunic and lift the smell of silt and warm water. You pause beside a shaded wall, pressing your back against the cool clay. Somewhere nearby, water trickles steadily. You follow the sound past a row of storage sheds, each sealed with rough-wrapped rope and wax seals. Beyond them, the city opens to the banks of one of Ur's irrigation canals. It gleams in the late afternoon light, cutting through the land like a scar stitched with reeds. A group of workers stands knee-deep in the water, clearing debris with long-handled rakes. One calls out in a language you can't place, perhaps a regional dialect, or just too fast for your ears. He waves you over and hands you a rake without hesitation. You hesitate. But before you can protest, you're knee-deep in murky water, pushing through reeds and floating rubbish. It's strangely soothing. The water cools your legs, and the rhythmic scrape of the rake sets a steady pace. A fish flickers past your ankle. You freeze, then laugh quietly to yourself. Further downstream, you notice a man using a wooden frame to measure water levels. Another records the numbers on a clay tablet held high above the splash zone. These readings, you realize, aren't just for curiosity, they're survival. Floods come often, and they come fast. If the canal overflows, the fields drown. If it runs dry, nothing grows. Someone explains, half in words and half in gestures, how the city's water rights are managed. Each family has an allocation, and if one household draws more than its share, disputes can get heated, sometimes violent. You remember the wrestling match from earlier. Now it makes more sense. Historians still argue whether these irrigation systems were the first examples of structured government or simply a way for powerful families to hoard resources under the guise of fairness. You suspect it's both. You hand back the rake and wade toward shore. Your legs are covered in fine mud. But you don't mind. It cools your skin like a gift. On the bank, two girls rinse baskets of vegetables, laughing and splashing each other until an older woman scolds them sharply. They glare at her, then smirk at you in shared rebellion. As you walk back toward the city center, your path takes you past rows of barley fields. Thin irrigation ditches snake through them like veins. The plants are tall, brushing your hips, their heads heavy with grain. A boy with sunburned cheeks nods at you as he swings a bronze sickle through the stalks. It's harvest time, and harvest means taxes. Beyond the fields, another wall of Ur rises, not for protection. This is the outer barrier of the temple precinct. The sacred zone. You can't enter, but you can see it. The ziggurat looms here too, its top now catching the sun like a torch. A few white-robed priests move along its base, flanked by guards. Their feet raise no dust. They seem to float. You're not the only one watching. Several townsfolk have gathered near a shaded bench, resting baskets on their knees. They whisper about omens, about dreams, about what the gods are trying to say through the flood patterns. One man swears the full moon last night had a strange color. Another insists a bird flew into his house and knocked over an oil lamp. Everyone nods solemnly. That means something. A woman nearby turns to you suddenly. Do you dream, she asks? You blink. Sometimes you answer carefully. She nods as though that confirms something important, then clasps your hand and mutters a prayer into your palm. You don't understand the words, but the sincerity in her tone settles over you like a shawl. Not far from this circle, a group of boys plays a game involving throwing stones into jars. One of them cheats, and his friend notices. Instead of fighting, they just start over. Rules here are flexible. But if you cross the wrong boundary, say, water rights or offerings, you learn very quickly that flexibility has limits. You continue walking until your legs feel like clay. You pass a bakery where flatbreads are slapped onto the sides of a large, open oven. The heat waves roll toward you, pushing sweat back out through your pores. You don't even mind anymore. Someone hands you a piece of fresh bread. No words. Just an open palm and a glance that says, "Eat." You do? It's crisp on the outside, soft inside, and still steaming. You tear it slowly, letting the warmth fill your mouth and settle deep in your chest. As you chew, you hear a shout from a nearby courtyard. A scribe is arguing with two men holding a clay tablet between them. You step closer to listen. Apparently, one man claims his neighbor flooded his garden by diverting a canal overnight. The neighbor insists it was accidental. that the canal wall gave way in the storm. The scribe sighs and gestures for silence. He reads the tablet aloud, pointing to each wedge-shaped mark as though it's a knife. The law is clear if found guilty. The offender must pay compensation not in coins, but in barley and labor. The two men scowl at each other. A verdict is coming. The scribe glances at the sky, mutters to himself, and scratches something new into the clay. Then he seals the case with his official cylinder seal, rolling a tiny carved image across the tablet's surface. It leaves a trail of lions and spears, binding as any court ruling. The man deemed guilty sighs, then trudges away towards the granary. No yelling, no riot, just resignation. You're amazed at how something as simple as wet clay can hold such power. These people write their truths into earth itself. The day is fading now, and golden light begins to melt into copper. Oil lamps flicker to life one by one, casting amber halos onto walls and skin. Children are called home. Doors are bolted with reeds tied into knots. The city exhales, and still the ziggurat glows, as if it too is waiting for night, for omens, for the next dream. You look up once more, then down at your mud-streaked arms and sweat-glued clothes. You're tired, gritty, sunburned, but alive in a way you didn't expect, and you haven't even made it to dinner. By now, your body is coated in a thin film of dust, sweat, and dried mud. You've stopped caring, or maybe you've just adapted. The sun hovers low on the horizon, its light taking on that magical shade between gold and rust. It spills across the rooftops and makes the smoke rising from cook fires shimmer in the air like silk threads unraveling into the sky. You follow your nose through the alleyways, drawn by the scent of something savory and spiced. You pass homes where people are gathered in doorways, chatting in low voices or resting against cool clay walls. A girl hums to herself as she grinds something in a stone bowl, maybe garlic, maybe cumin. You can't quite tell, but it smells rich, ancient, grounding. At the far end of the lane, an open courtyard beckons. A large clay oven glows from within, orange firelight flickering along its cracked surface. Around it, a family sits on low stools, passing flatbreads and bowls from hand to hand. An older man catches your eye and waves you over. He pats the stone next to him. You don't hesitate. The bread they offer is warm and dusted with ground herbs. You break off a piece and dip it into a bowl of lentils stewed with onions and something smoky. The first bite floods your mouth with flavor earthy, tender, deeply satisfying. You close your eyes and chew slowly. They say nothing, but they smile when they see the relief on your face. A little girl beside you offers a sliver of dried date. You thank her. She giggles and runs off to chase a dog that clearly wants no part in being chased. As the food disappears, the courtyard shifts into story time. The older man clears his throat, and suddenly the quiet settles. Children gather at his feet. Even the dog lies down. He begins to speak not loudly, not theatrically, but with steady rhythm and careful words. You don't understand every detail, but the cadence carries you. His tale is about a flood, a boat, a dove, and a god who changed his mind. The children gasp at the right moments. One of them mutters a line from memory. Clearly, they've heard this one before, but they still lean in close. Beside you, a woman leans over and whispers, "That's Utnapishtim's tale. Older than the river, maybe older than the sky." She smiles, and her teeth are stained with time. We tell it so we don't forget. Historians still argue whether these oral stories were proto-myth or embedded history, whether they were meant to entertain or instruct. But you understand now that it's both. The stories don't just explain the world. They hold it together. As the storyteller wraps up, he lets the last words settle in the air like smoke. No one claps. They just sit with it, letting the silence do what applause never could. One by one, people begin to rise. Bowls are stacked. Mats are rolled. The girl returns, a bit of dog fur clinging to her tunic, and falls asleep curled up beside her grandmother. The oven is sealed for the night. You stand, stretch, and thank your host with a nod and hand to your chest. He nods back, eyes soft but tired. The clay beneath your feet is warm. It holds the day's heat, just like you. Back on the street, lanterns have replaced sunlight, made from clay or carved stone, filled with oil and a bit of wick. They glow with a soft flicker. Their light doesn't pierce the darkness so much as hold it at bay. You walk slower now. There's nowhere in particular to go. From above, the sky deepens into a dome of deep indigo. Stars emerge one by one, sharp, bright, and unfamiliar. These aren't the constellations, you know. These are the stars of Sumer, of gods and heroes you've never heard of. Yet someone nearby knows them well. An astrologer sits on a rooftop, staring upward with an expression caught between reverence and concern. He cradles a clay tablet in his lap and sketches symbols slowly with a pointed stick. You hear his voice carry down to the street in soft, rhythmic declarations. You see that curve, he murmurs. Venus returns, but not where she should. A woman standing nearby crosses her arms. She's early. That means change. The astrologer doesn't respond. He just continues tracing. You keep walking. From around a corner, you hear a flute begin to play low, winding, mournful. It sounds like longing. Or maybe it's just the wind playing tricks. You turn and see a man sitting alone outside his home, carving a pattern into a wooden bowl as he plays. He doesn't acknowledge you. He doesn't need to. Further ahead, the air grows warmer again as you near the outer edge of the city where the kilns burn all night. This is where pottery is born, reshaped from earth and fire into jars, plates, urns, and lamps. You pass a row of half-finished pieces set out to dry, some crooked, some perfect. Each one a small declaration of survival. The potters work silently, their faces lit by flickering coals. A young boy adds fuel to the fire, while an older man carefully turns a vessel with calloused fingers. It's hypnotic, the cycle of creation and risk. One wrong move and the piece shatters. But when it works, it lasts centuries. You crouch to warm your hands near the kiln. The potter looks at you, then looks away. No judgment, just acknowledgement. And now the night is fully here. The stars seem closer somehow, like they're leaning in to listen. You find your way back toward the neighborhood you started from, winding through the dim alleys and sidestepping sleeping animals. A cat stares at you from atop a broken jar. A rooster, yes. Again lets out a confused half-crow before realizing it's not morning. You duck into a quiet courtyard and settle beside a wall, folding your arms across your chest. You're not sure if you're welcome, but no one tells you to leave. That's enough. Somewhere nearby, a woman sings a lullaby. The tune floats into the air like threads of honey. A child whimpers once, then goes quiet. You close your eyes, and for the first time all day, the city exhales and so do you. The bricks around you are warm. The scent of clay and ash clings to your skin. You're sore, hungry again, and covered in a dozen kinds of dirt. But the stars are out. The stories are told, the bread was shared, And somehow, despite everything, you belong. The night is gentle, but it is not silent. As you drift near sleep, sounds from across the city continue to stir. Somewhere in the distance, a dog lets out a low, uncertain bark. A clay pot clinks softly as someone places it outside their door. The wind carries the scent of ash and herbs. Someone is still burning incense, perhaps in private prayer, or maybe just out of habit. You shift slightly, back pressed against the warm wall. The reed mat beneath you scratches at your ankles, and your arm has gone numb in the way that reminds you this is not your bed, not your time. Yet somehow you don't want to leave, not yet. Suddenly, there's a soft shuffle in the alley. A boy no older than 10 appears in the moonlight, carrying a bundle wrapped in linen. He doesn't speak. He glances at you, then quietly knocks on the door across the courtyard. The knock is coded 2 quick taps, 1 long pause, then 2 more. The door opens just enough to reveal a flicker of lamplight. The boy passes the bundle inside. No words are exchanged. The door closes. The boy vanishes. You stare at the space where he stood. Someone beside you murmurs, "Midwives never sleep." You hadn't noticed the old woman curled nearby. Her eyes glint in the dark. "That was a birth cloth," she explains, not unkindly. "There's a baby coming tonight." You nod slowly. Another life entering this world of dust and gods and barley debts. The old woman chuckles softly. It's lucky to be born on a warm night. They say Inanna walks the rooftops when the wind is low. The city feels smaller in this moment, more fragile, but also more alive. You stay there a while longer, letting the quiet fold around you like a shawl, until shouting, not loud, not panicked, but urgent. You rise, your legs aching, and move toward the sound. Down the alley, past a resting goat and a pot that's cracked clean in half, you find the source a narrow home lit with too many oil lamps. Inside, voices rise and fall. Someone's pacing. Another speaks quickly in a tone that only means trouble. You stand at the edge of the doorway, trying not to intrude. A man steps out suddenly, his face tight, his tunic damp with sweat. He carries a clay tablet in both hands like it might break. When he sees you, he says nothing, just brushes past and disappears into the night. A woman inside sighs, loud and heavy. She sees you at the threshold and waves you in. You step forward, uncertain. The room smells like hot wax and old parchment. A low table sits in the center, littered with styluses, half-written tablets, and a bowl of black ink. In the corner, a young man barely older than a boy sits with his head in his hands. He's wearing the robe of a novice scribe. The woman gestures to the mess of clay and symbols. "He copied the wrong debt figures," she says quietly. "For a merchant with a temper." You glance at the boy. His shoulders tremble slightly. He doesn't speak. You look down at the tablet he was working on. The symbols are neat, almost beautiful, but 2 lines contradict each other. One says 10 jars of oil, the other 12. A mistake simple in your world, perhaps. But here, it can cost more than reputation. His first mistake, the woman says, rubbing her temples. He'll be lucky if the merchant settles for barley. There's a long silence. Historians still argue whether ancient Mesopotamian record-keeping was primarily about commerce or control, but in this dim room, it's obviously both. Each symbol on that clay carries weight. It determines who owes what, who eats when, and who might end up in front of a judge tomorrow. You leave them quietly, the boy still silent, the lamps flickering over his shaking hands. Back outside, the night is cooler. Finally, you cross the city's eastern quarter where the workers live. It's quieter here, The air smells faintly of bread gone cold. You hear a low, rhythmic sound, someone grinding flour late into the evening, perhaps trying to catch up after falling behind. A baby cries 2 homes over, then goes silent. In the next lane, you pass by an open window and see a man reading aloud by lamplight, reciting something from a tablet to 2 boys curled up beside him. A story, perhaps, or a lesson. One boy is already asleep, head resting on a basket of flax. The other fights it, blinking hard. You smile. You remember what that fight feels like. Then, a low horn sounds in the distance. Not sharp, not a warning. A ritual call. You follow the sound through the narrow alleys until you reach a temple courtyard lit by dozens of small flames in shallow bowls. Worshippers kneel along the edge, their bodies casting long shadows across the polished stone. The high priest stands at the center, eyes closed, arms raised toward the sky. He chants in a voice low and even, like a river moving over stone. The language is old, older than writing, and the sound of it cuts through the night air like memory. A temple attendant walks past you with a basket of offerings, bread, fruit, and something wrapped in linen. You don't know what's inside. You don't ask. You sit at the edge of the courtyard, watching the flames dance in the shallow bowls. The air is thick with the smell of burning herbs, rosemary, juniper, maybe something rarer. Your eyelids grow heavier. The priest's voice rises once, then fades. The ritual is done. People begin to leave in silence, the firelight lingering in their eyes like dreams. One woman turns back and murmurs a prayer beneath her breath. Another scatters a handful of petals onto the stone. You stand. It's past midnight now, and is quieter than it's been all day. Even the ziggurat seems to sleep, its silhouette soft against the dark sky. The stars above it are sharp, and there's something strangely comforting in knowing that they, too, were watched by people just like this, just like you thousands of years ago. You walk slowly through the empty streets. You pass a sleeping guard curled against a doorway, his spear clutched loosely in his arms. A cat pads silently past, tail high, eyes glowing. A pottery wheel creaks in the wind. And then, you stop. Ahead, a small gathering stands in a courtyard. You inch closer and see what they're looking at. A newborn, wrapped in soft linen, resting in a reed cradle. The mother sleeps beside it, her chest rising and falling in slow, deep breaths. A midwife kneels nearby, hands stained, eyes red but proud. She glances up at you. Inanna walks tonight. She whispers, "You believe her." And you keep walking. You walk on, past the courtyard where the newborn sleeps. Your footsteps light, as if you might wake the city with anything heavier. The air is softer now, laced with the smell of wet clay and cooling ash. A dog shifts in its sleep nearby but doesn't stir, somewhere behind you. A door creaks open, and 2 women laugh in hushed tones, muffled and melodic, like a lullaby not meant for you. At night is a different place, quieter, yes, but not still. It's a city that breathes in its sleep. Even now, you catch glimpses of life pulsing beneath the surface, a flicker of movement behind a curtain, the soft clink of a jug being filled, the hush of whispered stories shared under the stars. You pause at a narrow alley where fireflies hover like floating embers. One drifts close to your face, and for a moment, it feels like time forgets to move forward. Then a voice calls out, not harsh, but clear. "Hey, you there!" You turn and find a figure walking briskly toward you. He's older, wearing a dark robe and a necklace with a carved seal dangling near his chest. His stride is confident, but not threatening. When he stops in front of you, he smiles. "You look like someone who doesn't sleep much," he says, eyes sharp with amusement. "Come with me. I'm short a hand." You hesitate, but he's already turned. You follow. He leads you through a passageway you hadn't noticed before, stone beneath your feet now. Smoother, more worn. At the end is a modest structure, built lower than most homes, with a sloped roof and 2 torches flickering at its entrance. Carved into the clay above the door is a symbol, an open eye framed by 2 crescent moons. Inside, the space opens into a circular room. Shelves line the walls, packed with clay tablets, reed bundles, small jars sealed with wax, and hanging strips of dried herbs. At the center is a long table, and on it lies a partially unrolled scroll made of stitched linen. You recognize none of the writing. "This is the House of Records," the man says, setting a tablet down on the table with care. "But don't let the name fool you, it's also the House of Questions." You look around. The room smells like ink and dust and smoke, layered deep. "I'm Elihu," he says, gesturing for you to sit. "Archivist, translator, and, apparently, night shift guard." You sit. He picks up a stylus, points to the scroll. "We found this 2 weeks ago, near the southern ruins. But the dialect? It's old, even for us. I've translated most, but this bit," he taps a line, "is troublesome. You blink. Why me?" He shrugs, because sometimes fresh eyes see what tired ones miss. You lean in. The symbols are strange, curving, more like brush strokes than wedges. You don't recognize them, of course. But one looks vaguely like a tree. Another, maybe a star. You suggest as much. Elihu nods. "That's what I thought too. But that star," he points, "is always placed before the word for arrival. Maybe it means more." He talks for a while, about seasonal calendars and flood cycles, about dreams that repeat across generations and omens written into architecture. You understand maybe half, but you don't mind. His voice is steady, and the room feels timeless. He pours you a cup of something warm, spiced, dark, slightly bitter. Not quite tea, not quite beer. You sip slowly, grateful. Historians still argue whether Mesopotamian scholars were more astrologers than scientists, more poets than clerks. But in this quiet space, with Elihu scratching translations into soft clay, the answer is simple. They were both. They had to be. As he continues to work, you wander toward one of the shelves. A tablet catches your eye, thinner than the rest, etched with a border of tiny flowers. You pick it up gently. Careful. Elihu warns, not unkindly. That one's a love poem. You smile and read the first line aloud. It translates roughly to, "Your voice is the cool wind between barley stalks." You don't know why it hits you the way it does. Maybe it's the quiet. Maybe it's the hour. But you place the tablet back as if it were sacred. Elihu glances at the door. "Almost time," he mutters, gathering a stack of tablets and slipping them into a sack made of stitched reed and linen. You help. The weight surprises you, each tablet heavier than it looks. You imagine a time traveler someday finding one, marveling at what was left behind. Outside, the first gray edge of dawn begins to touch the sky. You and Elihu step out into the coolness. A few birds begin to chirp hesitantly, like they're still deciding if it's too early to sing. The stars are fading. The ziggurat glows again, but now with promise. Not mystery. You help him carry the tablets to a side building where he locks them in a chamber lined with shelves. He thanks you, then turns to go but pauses. "You see now," he says softly, "we weren't so different." You nod. He smiles. "Come back tomorrow night. Or don't. But if you do, I'll have more questions." Then he disappears into the morning mist, the hem of his robe catching the breeze like a whisper. You stand there a long time. The city stirs again, soft sounds returning like remembered dreams. A pot clinks, a door opens. Somewhere, a rooster makes its daily mistake and crows too early. You walk toward the eastern horizon, where the sun is barely peeking up, tracing the edge of the fields in firelight. Barley sways gently in the breeze. You can smell the earth, still damp from last night's ritual washings. And behind you, wakes. You keep walking, guided now by the first warmth of the rising sun. The eastern sky blushes from pale pink to soft gold, brushing the tops of the city's walls and rooftops in tender light. The cool air clings a little longer to the edges of the mud brick buildings. But the heat is coming. You can feel it waiting. As you wind back through the alleys, you pass homes stirring with the rhythm of another new day. A door creaks open beside you, and an elderly man hobbles out with a jug in one hand and a cane in the other. He nods at you, not with suspicion, but with that resigned expression of someone who has seen thousands of mornings and knows they all begin the same. Further along, a girl sweeps the dust from her doorway with a bundle of dried reeds. She hums softly as she works, pausing only to scowl at a chicken that insists on undoing her progress. You catch her eye, and she smirks, tired, amused, alive. The smells of the morning shift as you go. Where last night was ash and wax and spice, now it's warm barley, fire-smoked eggs, and the ever-present undercurrent of damp clay. You stop at a courtyard where a woman kneels over a small fire, flipping flatbread with one hand while cradling a toddler with the other. She glances up briefly, then returns to her rhythm. The toddler watches you with wide, unblinking eyes. You take a seat on a stone ledge nearby, letting the morning unfold around you. You're sore, you're dusty, but you're starting to understand this place, not just the sounds or the smells, but the silence between them. That quiet patience, that deep endurance. Behind you, two men begin loading a cart with bundles of reeds and clay jugs. They speak in half sentences and gestures, clearly having done this together for years. One lifts a jug to his shoulder, grunts, and says something that makes the other laugh. It's the kind of laughter that says, "We've survived worse." You watch the cart disappear down the road, its wooden wheels creaking against stone and packed earth. A few children run after it briefly, drawn by the chance of spilled fruit or an excuse to chase something. Then they vanish, too. You rise and wander toward the riverbank. The Euphrates is wide here, stretching lazily under the warming sky. Fishermen are already out, their small boats drifting like leaves. Nets glint in the sun as they're pulled up, some empty, some writhing with silver. The water slaps gently against stone and mud. Reeds sway with every breeze. You sit on the bank and remove your sandals, sinking your toes into the damp earth. It's cold and soft and strangely comforting. To your left, a group of women is gathered, washing linen in the river. They beat the fabric against flat stones with rhythmic slaps, laughing and gossiping between each swing. One woman sings an old lullaby, and another harmonizes instinctively, creating a tune as ancient as the water itself. The sun catches in their wet hair, turning it to gold. You lie back for a moment, arms folded behind your head, eyes half closed. The warmth of the morning grows stronger, pulling shadows back into corners. A dragonfly hovers briefly above your face. You don't move. The moment feels like it could last forever, like the river itself is holding its breath with you. Then, a boy's voice cuts across the water. Fire in the potter's quarter. You sit up. The women look toward the west with concern. One grabs her wet cloth and begins wringing it tightly. Another gathers the children and urges them back toward the city. You follow. By the time you reach the narrow streets of the Potter's district, the smoke is visible, dark and rising. Not yet a blaze, but more than a wisp. People have already begun forming a line from the canal, passing clay pots and jugs of water hand to hand. There's shouting, but it's organized. No panic, just urgency. You jump in. A jug is pressed into your hands. It's heavier than you expect. You pass it on, reach for the next, and again. The rhythm is fast, unrelenting. Your arms ache. Water sloshes down your tunic, soaks your feet. The heat from the smoke is rising. You can smell the burning reed, the acrid tang of singed clay. Somewhere nearby, a child is crying. You glance over and see a boy clinging to a half-finished jug, tears carving clean lines through the dust on his face. A woman kneels beside him, pulling him close, whispering something into his ear. He nods, presses his forehead to hers. The flames begin to hiss and fade under the weight of water. A cheer goes up, small, weary, but real. The danger passes. The crowd begins to disband, many leaving silently, the way people do when there's nothing else to say. You step back and lean against a nearby wall, chest heaving. A potter, his arm bandaged, soot on his cheek, approaches you and nods. "Lost 3 days' work," he mutters. "But we'll rebuild." He wipes his hands on his tunic and offers you a small jug, unbroken, its surface still smooth from yesterday's fire. You hesitate. He pushes it into your hands. "Water," he says. "Drink." You do. It tastes like earth and ash and river, and it's perfect. Historians still argue whether cities like Ur thrived because of planning or because of luck. But standing here, in the smoky aftermath of a fire contained not by tools, but by people bare hands and shared purpose, you suspect it's something else entirely: stubbornness, resilience. You make your way back towards the main road. The sun now fully risen and blazing down in earnest. Sweat beads on your brow again. The tunic sticks to your skin. The air hums with the promise of another long day. And yet, there's pride in the city this morning, in the way the market rebuilds its stalls, in the new flatbreads already on the fire, in the potter hammering nails back into a warped frame. You're not a citizen here, not really, but you've carried water for them now, and that means something. You move with the crowd as the city folds back into its usual rhythm, the way a river returns to its bed after a storm. The fire is already being spoken of in past tense, the fire that was, not the fire that is. You overhear murmurs as you walk. At least it didn't reach the kiln. That boy with the jug, did you see him? Only the outer walls scorched. Life in Ur leaves no time for dwelling. There's always barley to grind, goats to chase, debts to count. You find yourself drawn again toward the marketplace. Not because you need anything, but because it seems like the next chapter in whatever story you've stepped into. The vendors are back, already calling out their wares with the kind of relentless energy only desperation can fuel. Clay pots, onions, dyed wool, tiny dried fish that look older than the sun. A group of young scribes passes by, each carrying a fresh tablet, their robes cleaner than everyone else's. You can tell they've just come from the learning hall Ur's version of a school. One of them, maybe 13, walks with a slight limp but holds his stylus like a sword. He's reciting lines to himself under his breath. You catch the words, "Justice begins with order. Order begins with name." You wonder what your name sounds like in this place. If you were born here, if you mattered, you pause near a stall selling amulets, small clay charms with crude carvings, eyes for protection, spirals for luck. tiny dogs to ward off spirits. The vendor, a woman with wiry hair and cracked hands, holds one up to you. It's shaped like a fish with a hole through its mouth. For travelers, she says, helps you find the way back. You take it, not sure why. It's cool in your palm, smooth and solid. You leave her a small token in exchange a fragment of reed string you'd tied around your wrist last night. She smiles and says nothing. Further down the road, a commotion draws your attention. A group has gathered around a man standing atop an overturned basket, his arms raised high. He's not shouting, he's preaching. His voice carries easily over the crowd. The gods are not angry, but they are listening. And what they hear is noise, greed, false promises. The people shift uneasily. Some nod, some scoff. One child mimics him with exaggerated gestures until his mother yanks him back by the ear. You edge closer. The man's robe is patched, and his beard braided with bits of silver thread. His eyes flash not with madness, but urgency. We give offerings to Inanna and to Enki and to Utu, but we forget the offering of patience, of fairness, of the pause before blame. A man beside you mutters, "He says that until the taxes come due." Another retorts, "He's not wrong, though." Historians still argue whether figures like this spiritual speakers, part philosopher, part troublemaker, were tolerated or feared. Judging by the mixed reaction, the answer seems to be yes. You don't stay for the end. You slip away down a side path that leads towards the canal. The sun is climbing now, turning the river to gold. Laborers move slowly along the banks, checking sluices and stone barriers for leaks. A boy lounges under a fig tree, watching a bug crawl up his arm with intense focus. He doesn't even blink when you walk by. You sit under that same tree, just for a moment, just long enough to feel your heartbeat return to normal. The ground is warm. A fig drops beside you with a soft thump. You pick it up, bite into it. Sweet, almost too ripe. You eat it anyway. From here, you can see the outer fields stretching toward the horizon. Men and women work in clusters, some threshing barley, others repairing tools. A wagon tips in the distance, and two men run to right it, laughing like it's a game. You rise, brushing fig juice from your hands, and follow a narrow footpath out of the city proper. The transition is subtle. One moment you're stepping around a goat with a bit of cloth tied to its horn. The next, you're walking past tall stalks of barley and quiet irrigation channels. The noise fades. The breeze grows stronger. There's a woman sitting alone under a small canopy, watching a flock of sheep grazing near the canal. She's spinning wool with a drop spindle, the fibers pulling and twisting with hypnotic grace. You stop a few paces away, unsure if you're intruding. She looks up and gestures you closer. You sit beside her in the shade, neither of you speaking for a long while. She hums softly as she works, a lullaby or a prayer, or both. Eventually, she says, "You walked with Elihu last night." You blink. "How did you know I see the clay on your sleeves?" She smiles. "And the way you walk now. Slower. Like your thoughts are heavier." You glance at your tunic. Sure enough, faint traces of clay dust still cling to the creases. You hadn't noticed. She returns to her spindle. "He talks too much," she adds, "but he listens. Too." That's rarer. A sheep bleats nearby. Another responds. A fly buzzes lazily past your ear. You ask her what she's spinning the wool for. "A tunic, a blanket, a shroud," she says simply. "My uncle passed 2 nights ago. They'll bury him tomorrow." You don't know what to say, but she doesn't seem to expect anything. After a moment, she continues. "We wrap the dead in wool, not linen. Linen's too proud. Wool is humble. It remembers the body. It clings. She ties off a length of yarn and begins again. The sun moves higher. "I'm sorry," you say. She nods. "Don't be." He died after a full meal, under a quiet roof. "That's better than most." You thank her for the shade and the silence, and she nods again. As you stand to leave, she presses a bit of spun wool into your hand. "For the road," she says. "Tie it to your charm. Then you'll be a traveler twice." You walk back toward the city, charm and wool knotted together in your palm. Rises before you, bathed in daylight, now alive, worn, holy, flawed. And you realize something. As your feet cross back over the dusty threshold, you didn't survive this long by luck. You've lasted a day in ancient Mesopotamia, but just barely. By the time you return to the heart of the heat is unapologetic. It presses down on your shoulders, bakes the earth beneath your feet, and seems to echo back at you from every sunlit wall. The city's rhythm has shifted again. What was gentle at dawn is now relentless. The air is alive with the clatter of carts, the clink of tools, the chant of workers moving stone, grain, and time itself. You make your way toward the ziggurat. It stands above the city not as a monument, but as a command. Massive, stepped, sunburnt, it pierces the sky like a man-made mountain. You hadn't planned to go near it again, but your feet carry you there without asking. The crowd thickens as you approach. A procession is underway. You see musicians in front, drummers, flute players, and men shaking sistrums that rattle like dry wind. Behind them, robed officials carry baskets of fruit, bread, and what looks like embroidered cloth. A boy walks barefoot, balancing a painted jar on his head, eyes locked forward in practiced stillness, and at the very center, walking slowly, deliberately, a priestess. She wears a white robe that catches the light like polished bone. Her face is painted with ochre, and in her hand she carries a small bronze dish filled with coals. Smoke rises in thin spirals as she walks, and people lower their heads as she passes. You step back into the crowd, just another face among many. The procession winds up the first steps of the ziggurat, each participant placing their offering carefully before continuing. You feel the weight of hundreds of eyes, not watching her, but watching themselves, watching her. Every movement feels choreographed, not just for the gods, but for each other. A man beside you murmurs, "It's the first moon of the season. The gods are thirsty." You nod as though you understand. Once the last priest disappears inside, the crowd begins to break apart. People drift away in groups of twos and threes, talking softly. You remain a little longer, staring at the ancient bricks, each one a labor, each one a breath, each one still here. Eventually, you move on. You find yourself back in the scribe quarter, where Elihu's words echo in your mind. You pause at a shaded wall where students kneel, practicing their marks in clay. A teacher watches them with the weariness of someone who has corrected the same stroke 1,000 times. He doesn't raise his voice, just shakes his head when a boy presses too hard and cracks the surface of the tablet. You kneel at the edge, curious. The teacher doesn't stop you. Instead, he tosses you a lump of clay. You smooth it flat, you breathe, and you press the stylus down. Wedge, wedge, wedge. The strokes are clumsy, uneven, but this time, no one laughs. A girl next to you peeks at your work, nods once, and returns to hers. You're not fast, you're not skilled, but for these few minutes, you're one of them. As you stand to leave, the teacher says, "We write to remember, even when memory doesn't want to stay." You nod. A bell sounds in the distance. Not alarm, not ceremony. Just the midday bell. Time to eat, Time to rest, time to trade sun for shade. You drift back toward the quieter parts of the city, where the walls lean inward and the streets feel less like roads and more like whispers. A woman waves you inside her home without asking your name. She offers water, bread, a spot beneath a hanging cloth that flaps gently in the breeze. You sit, you sip. Around you, other guests do the same. A merchant dozes with his head against the wall. A washerwoman rests her feet in a basin of cool water. No one speaks. Not because there's nothing to say, but because this hour belongs to the body, not the tongue. You close your eyes, not fully asleep, not fully awake, just quiet. The world shrinks to the rhythm of breath, the soft rustle of fabric, and the distant thump of drums still echoing from the ziggurat. Time loses its grip. You feel as if you are part of something older than memory. When you open your eyes, the light has shifted again. The afternoon is older now, the shadows longer, the air cooler but only slightly. You rise and thank your host. She nods and waves you on, already folding a cloth with one hand and shooing a lazy fly with the other. You step back into the sun and blink against the light. Not far from the house, you hear a strange sound, low, mechanical, rhythmic. You follow it. It leads you to the edge of the industrial quarter, where a group of men are turning the great wheels that operate one of Ur's floodgates. The mechanism is simple but brilliant ropes, pulleys, clay weights, and as the water spills through the canal mouth, you can hear the city sigh in relief. One of the men sees you and gestures. You join them. Again, this time, the work is heavier. Your arms shake, your back tightens. But as the wheel groans and the gate shifts open, a cheer rises around you. You grin, sweat running down your face. Later, someone hands you a reed mat and points toward the shade. You sit again, breathe again. And in that breath, something clicks. You've been following the city, drifting through it like mist. But now the city follows you. You know its rhythms, its corners, its rules. You know which stones are loose, which alley floods first, which bread is better in the morning and which is only good if dipped in lentil stew. You're not just surviving Mesopotamia anymore. You're part of it. For a moment, that thought is both comforting and disorienting. How long have you been here? How long could you stay? You close your eyes, listening to the sound of water rushing through the gate and boots crunching on clay. Somewhere far off, someone is singing again one of those wordless songs that sounds like the beginning of something. And though your body is sore and your skin is burnt, you realize you no longer want to leave. Not yet. You linger in the shade beside the canal, watching the water carve its ancient route through stone and silt. The current moves lazily now, content under the careful management of hands calloused by centuries. A dragonfly skims across the surface. A child's laughter bursts from somewhere down the street, a sudden spark in the heat-heavy air. The city, once so foreign, now hums like a melody you've begun to memorize. But even here, in this newfound comfort, change doesn't wait. A runner passes by barefoot, lean and fast, clutching a tablet against his chest. He doesn't stop, doesn't shout, just the sight of him is enough. One of the floodgate workers curses under his breath and starts pulling his sandals on. Others rise more slowly, the kind of slow that says we already know this will not be good. You follow. It leads you to the gathering square, not the marketplace, but the one reserved for proclamations. The air is thick, not with incense or cooking fires, but with anticipation. More runners arrive. A line of guards takes position near the base of the podium. Then comes the priest, not one you recognize. Younger, gaunter. His robe doesn't quite fit. He waits for silence. When it comes, he unrolls a tablet and speaks. voice steady but dull. "There has been a theft," he says. The crowd shifts, murmurs. 2 jars of sacred oil taken from the temple storehouse. A tablet of offerings destroyed. The king demands restoration. Gasps. One man says aloud what others are thinking. That's a capital offense. The priest nods. The gods must not be disrespected. The thief will be found. Justice will be swift. And just like that, the square begins to empty, people drifting away in tight clusters, speaking in low tones. You remain for a moment, staring at the empty space where the priest stood. Something cold twists in your stomach. You didn't think it was that kind of city. But of course it is. Even in a place of barley and bread, stories and stars, justice can arrive with a clenched fist. You wander without a clear destination. The city feels different now. Not hostile, just sharper. Like the edges are showing. You turn into a side alley for relief, only to find a line of guards searching homes. Not roughly, not cruelly, but firmly. One of them lifts a clay jar, shakes it, replaces it with care. Another asks a woman where her brother was last night. She answers, her hands trembling. You keep walking. Historians still argue whether these justice rituals were about fairness or fear, if they existed to protect the people, or only to protect power. But now, with tension coating the air like dust, it's clear they're about control. At the edge of the artisan quarter, you find Elihu. He's seated outside a shaded portico, squinting at a set of tablets under a woven canopy. His fingers are smudged with ink, his expression tight. You heard he asks without looking up. You nod. They said it was temple oil. He grunts. Temple oil, sacred tablets. They always choose the most dramatic words. You wait. Finally, he looks up. There are rumors already. A potter's apprentice, a runaway scribe. One boy claims it was a ghost. You raise an eyebrow. Elihu shrugs. He's 6. But frankly, he might be the closest to the truth. He sets his stylus down and leans back with a groan. These things happen. The question is what the city needs more justice or closure. He reaches into a pouch and pulls out something small, wrapped in cloth. He places it in your hand. A seal, cylinder-shaped, carved in miniature relief. Lions. Reeds. A star. It's old. He says, older than maybe. My mentor gave it to me. Said it belonged to a traveler. You turn it over in your hand, feeling the cool stone, the ridges worn smooth from use. Why give this to me? He shrugs. Because you're the first person I've met who walks like they don't want to belong, but somehow already do. You say nothing? There's nothing to say? You should leave the city tonight. He adds, just for a little while. Go to the outer shrines. Breathe cleaner air. Let the clay dry on your hands. You nod slowly. That night, you walk beyond Ur's gates. Not alone, there are others making the same journey. Pilgrims, perhaps, or simply those needing distance from the tightening grip of suspicion. The guards at the gate barely glance at you. You wonder how many of them believe the thief will be caught. The air outside is cooler. The stars are brighter. The hum of city life fades behind you, replaced by wind and the rustle of tall reeds. You walk until the ziggurat is just a silhouette against the sky, like a memory. Eventually, the path bends. It leads to a clearing marked by stones and woven flags. A ring of clay altars sits beneath a sky so wide it makes your breath catch. The outer shrines. Here. The gods are less official, less adorned. Offerings are simple milk, dates, a song murmured in half-forgotten syllables. A woman leaves a basket of figs and ties a thread around her wrist. A man burns herbs that sting your nose and eyes. A child lights a lamp and whispers a name you don't recognize. You find an empty altar and place the seal gently upon it. You don't ask for anything. Not health, not fortune, not answers. You simply sit, time stretches. When you finally rise, the seal is still there, but now it feels like it belongs to the ground, not to you. You leave it. The walk back to Ur is slow, but peaceful. In the distance, the walls glow faintly under torchlight. You pass travelers heading out, faces new, eyes tired. A girl rides on her father's shoulders, humming to herself. You step back through the city gate just before dawn. And the city breathes you in again. The city is quiet as you return, wrapped in that fragile hush before the first light of dawn. Ur always stirs early, but in this hour, it pauses just long enough for the wind to slip through open doorways and brush across sleeping faces. The fires are not yet lit. The cries of goats, the clatter of trade, the shuffle of sandals all still waiting in the wings of morning. You make your way through the eastern quarter. Even the dogs are asleep, curled beneath hanging baskets or tucked in shaded corners. A boy lies curled on a rooftop, one hand draped off the edge, palm open to the stars. The city feels suspended, as though the gods themselves are holding their breath. Your feet guide you toward the center, not out of purpose, but instinct. You arrive at the plaza again, where the announcement of the theft had been made just 1 day ago. The air here still feels tense, as if the words spoken then had soaked into the ground. There's no one here now, only a lone guard leaning on his spear, head bowed, half asleep. You glance at the platform, its clay surface scored with footprints. You wonder whose feet made them. You wonder who is missing today because of it. You turn and walk on, past the temple walls, past the market that hasn't yet awakened, past rows of homes beginning to stretch and sigh behind their doors. The ziggurat catches the very first kiss of sunrise. You pause, watching the golden line crawl down its steps. A flock of birds takes flight from its peak, wings slicing the light like scribes etching sky into stone. Something about the moment pins you in place, how ancient and new it feels at once. How despite all the fear and dust and fire, this city still rises to greet the sun like it always has. And then you hear it, a voice, not shouting, not angry, but firm. Stop. You turn. 2 guards approach from the direction of the temple. One gestures to you, the other already has a hand resting on the hilt of a short blade, not drawn, not threatening, but close enough to remind you that trust has limits. You raise your hand slightly, a gesture of openness. The first guard steps closer. Your face was seen near the storehouse yesterday, he says. Near the time of the theft. Your breath stills. You were there. Not inside. Not doing anything but passing by. Curious. Watching. And someone saw. "I don't you start." But he holds up a hand. "You will come with us," he says. Not unkindly. The temple elders will ask their questions. You follow. What else can you do? The walk is short, but feels longer. The streets are beginning to wake, now faces peering out from behind doorways. A woman sweeping her threshold. A child blinking against the light. No one stops you, but you can feel their eyes. You enter the temple complex through a side gate. It's quieter here than you expected. The air smells of ash, salt, and something bitter burned offerings, maybe, or old incense. You're led through a colonnade, past gardens trimmed with perfect symmetry, and into a small room lit by a single lamp. Inside sits an elder, her robe ink dark, her eyes unreadable. She gestures for you to sit. The guards wait outside. She watches you for a long time before speaking. When she does, her voice is dry but clear. You are not from here. It's not a question. No, you say, but you are still here. Why, you pause. You could tell her about curiosity, about falling into a world older than history and not wanting to leave, about stories and smoke and bread and the kindness of strangers. But none of those are answers she'll write down. I wanted to understand. You say simply. She leans back, folding her hands in her lap. There was a theft, she says, a serious one. But I do not believe you are the cause. You blink. Then why she waves her hand. It is not about guilt. It is about understanding who was there, who saw, who knows. Her gaze sharpens. Tell me what you saw near the storehouse yesterday. You describe it the runners, the gathering crowd, the quiet murmur of something gone wrong, the priest stepping out of the shadows, the smell of broken oil pots, the way no one wanted to meet each other's eyes. She nods slowly. And before that, you hesitate. I passed the wall just before the smoke began. I saw a boy running. Fast, not a messenger. She looks up. What did he carry? You try to remember? Nothing. I thought that was strange. He looked empty. Her lips press into a thin line. That matters. She says nothing more for a while. Then she stands and gestures toward the door. You are free to go, she says. But be careful where you are seen. The city forgets slowly. You thank her and step outside. The guards don't look at you. Back on the street, the sun has fully risen. Has shifted again now into its working self. Traders call out. Children chase each other through dust. Bakers slap dough onto ovens. A woman pours water onto her threshold to settle the heat. You walk. You think of the boy with empty hands, running, of the seal Elihu gave you, of the woman weaving a shroud from sheep's wool, of the priestess walking smoke up the ziggurat, of the potter, offering you water from the same jug he saved from the fire. You think of what it means to belong to a place, and what it means to be seen in it. Historians still argue whether visitors to ancient cities were welcomed or watched, if they were absorbed into the rhythm, or kept at its edge. But you now know, does both. It brings you in just far enough to test your weight, then waits to see if you stay. You reach the edge of the marketplace and feel, for the first time, something shift within you. Not fear, not wonder. Something simpler. A choice. You make that choice quietly, without ceremony. Not a vow, not a declaration, just a quiet decision to keep walking forward instead of turning away. Maybe you'll leave tomorrow. Maybe the day after. But not now. Not while the air still carries the morning scent of baking grain and warm river clay. Not while the threads of this place still wrap themselves around your ankles like forgotten roots. You wander toward the craftsman's quarter. The potters are already back at work, the fire-lit kilns humming with heat and purpose. Smoke curls upward in lazy spirals, and the scent of scorched earth clings to everything: your tunic, your hair, your memory. A young girl shapes a bowl with her small hands, tongue poking from the corner of her mouth in concentration. Her older brother adjusts her grip without speaking. Across the way, a man etches a story onto a tall jar with a reed stylus. You pause to watch as scenes unfold in careful lines: a hunter, a lion, a river, a storm. You recognize some of the symbols now, not enough to read, just enough to feel. They flow like thought turned to stone. He glances up, notices your gaze. This is for a burial, he says. The man wanted his story told, so it can speak when he cannot. You nod, suddenly aware of your own silence. You carry stories, he asks. You touch the charm at your neck, the little clay fish, the thread of spun wool. I think they're carrying me. He smiles at that. Then, like everyone in Ur, returns to his work without asking further. You move on. At the edge of the square, a group of boys chases each other with sticks, pretending to be warriors. One wears a broken pot on his head as a helmet. Another waves a reed like a sword. They shout in mock triumph, laughing breathlessly. No one tells them to stop. You sit nearby, watching. A woman hands you a cup of water without a word. It's cool and slightly bitter, drawn from a fresh pot. You drink slowly. Elihu finds you there, appearing beside you as if he'd stepped out of the stone. I heard they questioned you, he says, settling onto the ledge beside you. They did, and they let me go. He nods, unsurprised. You're lucky. Sometimes being a stranger is a shield. Sometimes it's a torch. You glance at him. And which is it now? He doesn't answer. Not directly. They found the boy, he says. The one who ran. Your pulse ticks upward. Was it him? They say yes. He was hiding in the granary, covered in dust, shivering. The oil jars were found there too, and the tablet broken, burned at the edges. He tried to destroy it. Silence hangs between you. Why, you ask? Elihu shrugs. Some say hunger. Some say revenge. Some say he was told to. It doesn't matter much now. You stare ahead, at the boys still playing. Will they punish him? Yes. Elihu says quietly. But they will not kill him. He is young, and the gods were merciful this time. You exhale slowly. Do you think he was alone, you ask? Elihu rubs his face. No one ever is. Not really. A pause. Then, softly. He adds, You still have the seal. No, you say. I left it at the shrine. He studies you? Good. Another pause. Are you staying? He asks. You don't answer. Not yet. Instead, you walk with him, back into the heart of the city, past the reed weavers and copper smiths, past the line of donkeys waiting patiently outside the grain exchange, past a woman pouring colored sand into a cracked wall to seal its wind-blown scars. The city is alive again, not louder, just fuller, wiser, worn. At the learning hall, the scribes are reading aloud. A boy recites legal code with too much confidence and not enough breath. His teacher corrects him with a sigh. Another is drawing pictograms of fish and birds, his tongue stained with ink from nervous chewing. You sit in the courtyard, listening. Words rise and fall like breath. You feel them settle over you not as noise, but as belonging. You don't need to understand every word. The rhythm is enough. Historians still argue whether Mesopotamian cities like Ur truly had a soul, something more than bricks and trade and order. But now, with your back against a sun-warmed wall and your feet coated in the dust of morning, you feel certain. They did. They do. Late in the afternoon, you make your way toward the river. The sun is beginning its slow descent, and the water glows like beaten bronze. People wash their arms, their faces, their hopes. A boy balances along the edge of a boat, arms outstretched. A man casts a net and waits, motionless, as if listening for something deeper than fish. You stand at the water's edge and let the coolness touch your toes. A woman nearby sings a song you've heard once before, on your first night here. The words are still half mystery, but the melody fits into you like a stone in a riverbed. You close your eyes and hum along. The world feels wide again, and quiet and kind. You look up at the sky, no omens, just birds tracing their slow arcs home, and as always, still standing, still breathing, still waiting. You don't know how long you stand there at the water's edge, letting the river lap softly around your ankles. The silt gathers between your toes, warm and cool at once, and the light scatters across the surface in dancing threads. Hums behind you, the city winding down in its own quiet rhythm, the kind that doesn't need to be hurried. Evening is approaching. You feel it not just in the color of the sky, but in the way the sounds shift. Laughter becomes softer. Calls from the market vendors fade. The goats stop protesting and the children begin to drift back to their courtyards. Voices lowering, eyes heavier. You climb the bank and begin walking. No destination, just movement. Your feet remember the path better than your mind. Left where the clay merchant sharpens his chisels. Right at the arch that always smells faintly of dates. Every corner of this place has begun to map itself into you. At the edge of the craftsman's quarter, a fire is being prepared not for heat, but for song. A drum is already sounding low, steady, heartbeat-like. You follow the sound to a courtyard lit by oil lamps strung between wooden beams. A semicircle of people has formed, some seated on woven mats, others standing with arms crossed, eyes fixed forward. In the center, a woman holds a lyre. She is older, her hair streaked with gray, her robes simple but dyed the deep blue that only a skilled artisan could afford. Her fingers pluck the strings gently at first, letting the melody find its shape. The crowd leans forward, as if the music were a secret being whispered directly to them. And then she sings. Her voice is worn velvet, frayed at the edges, but rich. The song isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It's a story, carried in notes and breath. You catch words you recognize: river, sky, brother, flood. Names of gods rise like smoke from the melody Enlil. Nana, Inanna. She sings of longing, of promises broken and remade, of a woman who waited so long for her love to return that she became the river itself. You sit on the ground without realizing it. You're not alone. All around you, people lean in as if they might miss something. A potter with cracked hands wipes his eyes. A girl too young to understand rests her head on her mother's shoulder and falls asleep with a soft sigh. The woman finishes the song with a single, drawn-out note. Then silence. No applause, just reverence. And then murmurs. The kind of murmurs that follow truth. Someone passes around small clay cups filled with dark, honeyed wine. You sip. The sweetness lingers on your tongue. The woman with the lyre meets your gaze for a moment, then nods, just once, before turning away. You rise as the gathering begins to drift apart. Some stay, talking in low voices. Others walk out into the evening light, hands behind their backs, eyes quiet. You make your way toward the learning quarter once again, drawn not by duty, but by rhythm. Elihu is there, of course. He is sitting on the same stone bench with a half-finished tablet in his lap. His stylus rests idle, his gaze fixed on nothing. He looks up as you approach. "Did you hear it?" he asks. You nod. The song he hums. "That one's older than the ziggurat. My grandfather used to sing a version of it to help me sleep." You sit beside him. "She sang it like she'd lived it," you say. "She probably has." A pause. Then, "The boy, the one from the temple, has been sent to work in the reed marshes." You blink. Alone with a fisher's family. It's not prison, but it's not kindness either. You say nothing. The choice hangs there between you, sharp and quiet. Elihu shifts. They didn't punish him for the theft. not directly. They punished him for fear, for chaos, for making people ask questions they weren't ready for. You close your eyes. The drumbeat from earlier still echoes faintly in your bones. Historians still argue whether punishment in cities like Ur was restorative or retributive, whether justice was truly about right and wrong or simply about balance. Looking out at the flickering lanterns, the hush settling over the stone streets, the weight of things left unspoken. You wonder if it was both. I think I'm staying. You say, finally. Elihu doesn't react at first. Then he smiles just slightly. I know. How you walk differently now, he says. Like the ground belongs to you. You stay there for a while, saying nothing more, letting the night wrap around your shoulders. The scent of charcoal and fig leaves drifts on the breeze. Somewhere, a child is being lulled to sleep with a song you now almost know. Eventually, Elihu stands. Come to the record house tomorrow, he says. We need help organizing the flood tables, and someone should copy the story of the fire before it becomes too beautiful to be useful. You nod. I will. He disappears into the shadows, his steps slow, deliberate. You watch him until he rounds a corner and is gone. Then, quietly, you rise and walk toward the edge of the city. You stand once more beneath the open sky. The ziggurat looms behind you, its terraces glowing faintly in the starlight. The river is still. The night is deep. You look down at your hands. They're smudged with soot, clay, and ink. Marks of a day that changed nothing and somehow changed everything. You tie the thread of wool around your wrist again. The charm of the fish rests against your chest. And for the first time since you arrived, you look up at the stars not as a visitor, but as someone who belongs beneath them. The stars above Ur are sharper tonight, clearer. Somehow, as if you've finally learned where to look, constellations no longer feel like strangers. They are stories in the sky, passed down through flame and breath, scratched into clay by hands long gone but still remembered. You watch the arc of one bright point inch across the heavens and wonder if it has a name here. It probably does. You begin walking back through the city, slow and quiet, your sandals barely whispering against the stone. The city at night is not silent, it breathes. Soft coughs from open windows, the creak of a gate being fastened, the murmur of late prayers floating on the air like mist. Each sound is familiar now, not just a noise, but a thread in the fabric you've begun to weave yourself into. You pass the bakery. Its ovens are dark, but the warm scent of bread clings to the walls. Across the lane, a row of oil lamps flickers along a ledge, casting a wavering dance across the clay. In the distance, you hear the soft thud of drums again, distant this time. Maybe from a wedding, maybe from a private rite. You pause outside the home where you've sometimes been given a place to sleep. The door is ajar. A child's sandal lies beside the threshold, half buried in dust. You step inside quietly. The room is dim, lit only by the fading coals in a corner hearth. You curl into the familiar reed mat near the back wall. It's scratchy, and the stone beneath it is unforgiving, but it's yours. For tonight. And that's enough. You close your eyes, not to escape the day, but to carry it with you into rest. Sometime in the night, you dream. You're standing at the edge of the river, the city behind you glowing faintly like a lantern in the dark. The water is speaking, though not in words, just sounds lapping, bubbling, whispering like wind through reeds. You place your hands into it, and when you lift them, they're clean. No ink, no clay, no blood, no dust, just skin. The moon above is full, and it watches you the way gods do, not judging, just remembering. You wake just before dawn. The room is gray, not yet warmed by the sun. The fire has gone cold. Outside, the roosters have not yet called, but the air carries that pre-dawn promise the city will rise soon. And with it, everything else. You step out into the morning chill. Today, you decide. You will go to the record house early, before the noise returns, before the heat seeps in and makes every surface too hot to touch. You pass the temple square, still empty, the last stars fading behind the ziggurat's silhouette. It no longer looms, it watches. When you reach Elihu's workroom, the door is unlatched. He's already there, cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by stacked tablets and bundled reeds. He looks up. Not surprised? You're early, he says. So are you. He grins. Some of us never sleep properly. You sit beside him. He pushes a stack of tablets toward you. These are the flood tables from last season. We need to copy them onto cleaner clay and record the anomalies. The western canals had irregular flow in the late moon. You nod. The words make sense now. Not all of them, but enough. You begin. The stylus feels natural in your hand. The clay resists slightly, then yields, as it always does. Wedge, line. You trace the shape of numbers. You record the name of a canal you once stood beside. You inscribe the date by a moon phase you now recognize in the night sky. A bird calls somewhere beyond the stone walls. Elihu hums as he works, off-key but steady. Time passes differently here, measured not in minutes, but in marks. Mid-morning light begins to filter in through the upper slits in the walls. Dust dances in it. You pause to stretch your fingers. They ache not from pain, but from the joy of doing something real, something that will remain, long after you've left this room. You should write something of your own, Elihu says without looking up. Like, what your story? You shake your head. I wouldn't know where to start. He shrugs. That's the trick. You don't. You start where you are. The clay listens. You look down at the fresh slab in front of you. Blank, smooth, waiting. So you begin. Your marks are uneven, hesitant, but they hold weight. You write of a stranger arriving, of a night filled with stars and a fire that left no scar, of barley fields and oil lamps, of a seal carved with lions and a charm shaped like a fish. You write of a city that sings even when it grieves, a city that suspects and embraces in the same breath. You don't finish the story. Not yet. Instead, you set the tablet aside to dry. Outside, the marketplace has awakened again. You hear the familiar rise and fall of voices, the bargaining, the clatter of carts. But here, in the quiet of the record house, the world feels still. Elihu ties his last tablet into a bundle and rises. Come, he says. We'll take them to the archive. You follow him through a low hallway into a chamber lined with shelves carved directly into the wall. It smells of dust, wax, and age. He places his bundle carefully onto the shelf. You do the same with yours. A small, blank spot remains beside them. You'll fill that one, he says. Soon he shrugs. When it's ready, you walk back into the sunlight together. The city stretches before you, alive and imperfect and real. You smell onions frying in olive oil. You hear the soft clang of bronze tools. Somewhere nearby, a child is reciting the names of rivers. You tie your hair back, you square your shoulders, and you step into the day. The day unfolds like a scroll, layered, deliberate, creased with repetition. You move through it with a kind of quiet certainty, not because you know what's coming, but because you've stopped needing to. No longer feels like a puzzle to be solved, but a rhythm to move with. You've stopped asking where you fit. Now, you simply step in time. The marketplace greets you with open arms and raised voices. Vendors shout greetings over baskets of figs, grain, and copper trinkets. You recognize some of them now. One nods as you pass, his hand wrist deep in a jar of lentils. Another, an elderly woman selling dyed cloth, presses a scrap of deep indigo into your palm. "For the heat," she says. "Tie it around your head? You do?" The color deepens in the sunlight, and the fabric smells faintly of river reeds and jasmine. Further down the road, you pass a storyteller perched on a low wall. Children gather at his feet, eyes wide, mouths open in silent wonder. He's spinning something grand, something about a bull who could speak and a prince who could not. The story makes little sense, but that's not the point. The children gasp and laugh in all the right places. You stop and listen for a moment. The storyteller meets your gaze, gives a slight nod, then carries on without missing a beat. A familiar voice calls your name. You turn and find yourself face to face with the potter you helped during the fire. His bandaged arm is gone, now healed, and he walks with a more confident gait. He's holding a bowl. "For you," he says, pressing it into your hands, "made from the same clay you helped save." The bowl is small, perfectly round, and painted with a spiral of tiny reeds and stars. It feels heavier than it should, not in weight, but in meaning. "Thank you," you say. He shrugs, grins. The fire was not the end, just another beginning. That seems to be the way of things here. You carry the bowl with care, unsure where to put it. Eventually, you stop by a public fountain and set it gently beneath a shaded alcove, where the water drips steadily from a carved lion's mouth. A woman nearby watches you with mild curiosity but says nothing. You sit on the edge of the fountain, listening to the city around you. The clang of bronze, the patter of sandals, the cluck of chickens, and the distant whir of a spindle spinning wool. Everything sounds softer now, not because it is quieter, but because you've learned how to hear it. Historians still argue whether people in places like thought of themselves as individuals or parts of a greater whole, whether identity was a possession or a duty. But here, in the steady heartbeat of the city, it becomes clear it's both. You are yourself, and you are everyone. You rise, stretch, and follow the road east toward the canals. The workers are waist-deep in water again, hauling silt and clearing weeds. One waves at you. You wave back. You no longer hesitate to step in, to grab a rake, to join the rhythm. No one questions it anymore. You spend the next hour helping guide a blocked channel back into its groove. Mud cakes your arms. The sun bakes your back. But your hands find the motion without thought. Push, pull, step, brace, over and over, until the water flows smooth again, gurgling in thanks. Later, a woman brings flatbread wrapped in cloth and passes it around. You eat beside the canal wall, your feet dangling into the current, watching the reeds dance in the flow. Someone starts humming a tune from the night before. You join in softly. By mid-afternoon, the heat becomes insistent. You return to the record house, where the stone walls keep the air cooler. Elihu is absent, but he's left a note on a shard of fired clay, sort the flood years. The ones marked with fish. And don't drink the ink again. You smile, then roll your eyes, just a little. You begin the work. The tablets are dusty, their marks faded, but you're learning how to read them with your fingers as much as your eyes. The ones marked with fish show up every 4th or 5th year, symbolizing abundance, or at least prediction of it. You arrange them in stacks by year, by moon phase, by water level. It's tedious, It's oddly comforting. As you work, a child appears at the door, one of the scribe's apprentices. He steps inside, barefoot, holding a tablet like a treasure. Message for Elihu, he says, offering it to you with 2 hands. You accept it carefully and place it on the shelf. Is he your teacher? The boy asks. You hesitate. No. You say, he's a friend? The boy considers that, nods, and runs off again, kicking dust behind him. You finish sorting the fish-marked tablets. Wipe your hands and leave the archive. The sun has started its descent. Shadows grow longer. The air smells of crushed herbs and simmering lentils. You wander north, at the edge of the city, near the burial grounds. You find the woman who was spinning the shroud days ago. She's kneeling beside a freshly mounded grave, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes closed. A garland of dried flowers rests at the head of the mound, next to a small tablet carved with simple symbols: wool, warmth, wind. You don't interrupt. You only nod as you pass. She doesn't open her eyes, but she nods back. By the time you return to the heart of Ur, the oil lamps have begun to flicker alive, one by one. You follow their trail like stars fallen to earth, guiding you through streets that now feel entirely your own. At the threshold of the home you sometimes borrow, a child greets you with a fig in one hand and a soft, welcome back. You smile, you accept the fruit, and you step inside. Later, as the fire crackles low and night settles in, you sit quietly with the others, shoulder to shoulder, sharing the silence. Someone begins to speak, telling a new story. And without thinking, without ceremony, your voice joins in. The story you begin is one you don't remember learning, but somehow you know it. Your voice slips into the rhythm of the city's tales, slow, patterned, meant for ears half asleep and hearts half guarded. You speak of a traveler who arrived with nothing but dust in their sandals and questions in their mouth, of how the city answered not with words, but with weight, the weight of clay, of fire, of silence, of song. Around you, the room stills. Someone shifts slightly, but no one interrupts. The fire crackles. A child leans against their mother's side. A man nods along, his eyes half closed, his hands curled around a bowl of cooling broth. Even the air seems to pause, holding the story in place like a bead on a string. You speak of the river not as a place, but a teacher, of the seal that was carried and left behind, of bread offered in silence and songs sung by women who knew the shape of grief. You do not name yourself in the story, but everyone knows. And no one says it out loud. When you finish, no one claps. Of course not. That's not what stories are for here. The silence that follows is a kind of blessing, an acknowledgement that something true has passed between you. The fire burns lower. Someone gently drapes a cloth over a sleeping child. A bowl is passed to you with the last bit of warm lentils. You eat slowly. The taste is familiar, earthy, peppered with cumin and ash, like every meal here satisfying, but earned. When you finally lie down, sleep finds you fast. It slips over you like a shawl pulled by steady hands. And in your dreams, the city is still breathing, still building, still carrying your name without needing to speak it. The morning wakes with a hush rather than a bang. Soft steps on stone, water being poured into jars, a door creaking open to welcome sunlight. You rise before the others and step out into the early quiet. The street is still wrapped in shadow, but you can smell the coming heat, the dusty sweetness of rising bread, the sharper edge of drying reed, and something else, the unmistakable scent of clay being wetted for shaping. You follow it. At the Potter's Square, the fires are already lit. A boy pumps a bellows with his foot, humming as he works. The kiln breathes in rhythm with him. Inhale, exhale, flame. You sit nearby, watching. After a while, the potter himself notices you. "No work today," he asks. "I've been sorting fish years," you say. He grins. "Tedious? Necessary?" You answer. He nods, then gestures to a lump of clay on the bench beside him. "Here," he says. "Make something useless." You blink. Useless. He shrugs. Not a bowl, not a jar, just something. For the joy of it, you've never been told that before. Not here? You take the clay. It's soft and warm from the morning sun. You press your thumb into it, then another. You don't know what you're making. Not really. A spiral A shape like the river's bend. Something with wings. By the time you stop, your hands are filthy and your knees ache. The lump is no longer a lump, though you're not sure what it is. The potter looks at it, nods. "Perfectly useless," he says. You both laugh. You leave it there, on the edge of the table. Maybe it will dry. Maybe it will crack. Maybe someone will throw it back into the water and start again. It doesn't matter. You return to the record house just before the sun crests the ziggurat. Elihu is already inside, balancing a large tablet across his knees. His eyes brighten when he sees you. You're late. I was being useless, you say. He grins. Finally. He hands you a stack of fresh clay slabs. We've got a backlog. 2 scribes went to help rebuild the west wall, and the rest are recovering from an over-enthusiastic wedding. You settle onto the stone floor and begin. Wedge, wedge, wedge. You inscribe records of land plots, of debts repaid in sheep and jars of honey. One line reads, 2 days' labor returned for 1 night's shelter. You pause when you write it, not because it surprises you, but because you've lived it. Time folds again. Later, as you're preparing a new slab, Elihu crouches beside you. He has a bundle in his hands, small, carefully wrapped in dyed cloth. "You'll need this soon," he says, placing it beside your tools. You open it slowly. Inside is a stylus, not carved reed, but bronze, light, balanced. It gleams faintly in the low light. You look up. "You're giving this to me." Elihu shrugs, but his smile is soft. "It was mine. I made it when I still thought the world could be understood if I just asked better questions." You turn it over in your hand. It fits perfectly between your fingers. "Write your own records," he says. "Not the ones they ask for. The ones that explain why you stayed." That evening, you walk back to the outer shrine, not to ask for something, not to leave something behind, just to sit. The city glows behind you, the ziggurat lit from below like a mountain on fire. The fields stretch out in soft waves. The wind carries the scent of crushed fig leaves and smoke. You sit by the altar where you left the seal. It's gone now. In its place, someone has left a figurine, a clay woman with wings, arms raised, mouth open in song. You nod to her, and to whoever placed her there. The stars rise again. You watch them from the ground, the clay still cool beneath your palms. You do not wonder where you are anymore. You are in Ur. You do not wonder who you are. You are the story no one thought to write, still unfolding. And when the wind shifts and the river speaks again, you understand what it says. You lasted more than a day. You stayed.